here today, so I just want real quick and have everyone just say their name, who they're with, just so everybody can orient in case we have some new faces. So.
I get to start.
Yep.
Austin Troy, I'm from faculty at University of Colorado Denver, part of the program.
Lisa Darling, South Central Water Supply Authority. Good morning.
Morning, Laura Belanger, Western Resource Advocates.
Rebecca Breezemore, the Colorado River District Pavilion for Amy Moyer, who had the baby in her.
Then Kate Larson with Resource Central. I'm Allison Evans with Eagle River Water and Sanitation District. I'm here on behalf of David Norris.
Andre Lopez, Ute Water, Grand Junction.
Tim York with Aurora Water.
And Val Chungto with the Mile High Flood District.
Morning, Drew Beckwith, City Westminster.
Paige McFarland, Water Efficiency Coordinator for Centennial Water and Sanitation District.
Rick Schultz, Capital Rock Water.
Good morning, I'm Catherine Morgan with Colorado Springs Utilities.
Hello, everybody. I'm Frank Kinder with Northern Water. Good morning, Pat McBacon with Hartford Homes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Waverly Claw with the Sonoran Institute.
Good morning, Tori Jarvis here with the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments.
Jacob Stankich, Associated Landscape Contractors, Colorado.
Morning, Ariel Miller with Fort Collins Utilities.
Thank you. I'm Jenna again, with CWCB, and we all know Marjorie, facilitator. So I'm just gonna walk through real quick just where we're at with the task force timeline, just to fill you in on some details so that we all know what we have left in the next 3 months, because January is moving up real fast. So okay, so these are the questions that we all saw during those one-on-one meetings as the task force was being formed. Also were the questions that we were looking at the beginning with the first presentation and the first meeting. Want to reorient these because these are the questions that we do have to cover in some capacity. Of course, there's been other conversations that have come out of these questions that will all also be captured in what we will end up reporting on and pushing out of all of these meetings. But just want to go over these again just to reorient, because it's been a little while since we've seen them. We have come quite a far way already with the meetings that we've had. These questions that are highlighted in yellow are ones that we still need to dive into further. We've touched on some of them, of course, the land use water development. We've been talking a lot about that throughout, but a lot of the conversation today will tie into that, so we'll be looking at that more. The Colorado water budget, talking about today, the water affordability and tax fees, also talking about today, and the October meeting, which I'll run through more of an agenda for what's coming up. We'll talk more about the resilient funding for drought. So while we are capturing all of the conversations, all the considerations, all the ideas that we've been going through, these are questions that we do have to explicitly look at. So that is really where we're focusing this meeting on, and then the next meeting, which we'll be having in Northern Water, and please to thank for that. So just, these aren't new, just wanted to look at it again so that we're all on the same page here. So the report, right? We have to have something out in January. We're starting to develop what this template will look like. So wanted to share these thoughts and ideas with you, just generally what it's going to look like. Of course, it's going to shift as we go through the iterative editing process, and we get feedback and go through everything with and build it out. But intro to the report, it'll be mainly table setting. So who the task force is, what the process has been, why it was created, how it's advancing Action 1.7 of the water plan, and then we'll go into the general themes and thoughts for those 8 questions. So we will be explicitly looking at those. The next slide will show kind of more detail on that if you're a visual learner, which I am. We'll also be looking at those other discussions and big ideas. So things that have come out of these conversations that maybe weren't on that original 8 list, but we don't want to lose that. So we don't really want to have those as just some bullet points down under those 8 questions, but they're highlighted. The third bullet on the third point isn't going to necessarily be read. So we want to make sure all these ideas that we've been talking about are spotlighted in this report. There'll also be things to note in there. So what are go-to resources that already exist? This doesn't necessarily have to be an exhaustive list, but more of an additional resource for anybody reading the report so they can go and look into more information. Also what's forthcoming, we've heard a lot about the native grass handbook. So including that in there to say, we don't necessarily have to be creating this because this work is already being done. So just so we can avoid the redundancies that still point to other sources that are either currently or forthcoming. And then things that maybe need more research, things that we can't quite get to the end of in the short time of the task force, but could possibly be receiving funding so that more research can be done, so more work can be done. So those ideas will all be focused in there. And then just a summary of the suggested considerations from the task force. This doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a consideration for all 8 of those questions. That, it's not written yet, so we don't know what that's going to look like. So there also could be those other big considerations fall outside of that. So everything will be captured and summarized. So if somebody wants to go in and read that one page, that might be the page that they read. And then looking at the uptake at various scales. So not all of these ideas that we've been talking about necessarily make sense at just the state level. They might make sense at the local level as well, even the individual level or any combination thereof. So we'll be looking at all the considerations and seeing where they can really fit and be best implemented. So for the visual learners like me, this is sort of what we're envisioning. So this first image over here, the context setting, just table setting of what the task force is, how the report can be used, just laying out what happened over these, I guess it would be about 8-9 months. Then a page or so, depending on the content, how long things are going to be for each of those questions. If you're trying to read any of this, it's not in English. It's not actually written. So you don't have to strain your eyes or zoom in. It's just sort of helping us figure out what it's going to look like. So, looking at the general discussion over these topics, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the opportunities and barriers, other considerations that might then connect to those other big ideas. Again, they're working at scales, and then looking at a case study. So I think call out Aurora on our case study example that is not written in English also. But just if there's something that we can pull out that's already happening, that's best practices or something relatable, so that it's just a little bit more guidance. That won't be incredibly thorough, but it could be another resource to point to. And then this last page, those other big ideas. Again, the length of this is going to vary based on the content that we're bringing out, everything that we're capturing, but just to make sure that they're also highlighted and not lost in those footnotes anywhere. So how are we going to get there? Like I said, January, the report is going to be out. So this is just going to lay out what the next few months are going to look like, what the editing process is. We're building it so it'll be iterative. We'll be able to receive your feedback, incorporate it, send it back to you, keep getting everything to make sure we're capturing it accurately. So today, luckily this one's covered. We're here. We're going to cover water budgets, rates, and tap fees. In October, we will be in Northern looking at resilient funding for drought. I will also have Doug Jevons from BBC Research and Consulting coming in as he's helping to refine that initial turf analysis with all the updated information that we've been getting over the last year. So he'll be bringing in where they're at with the report so we can get all of your feedback. There might be spots that we're missing that would be very helpful to pull into that. This will also be when you'll be receiving the first very, very rough draft with placeholders report to start providing feedback on. Obviously, there will be placeholders. There will be a whole question that we haven't gone into, so it won't be completely comprehensive, but it'll give you a chance to start looking at it rather than giving you the summaries and then us writing from the summary feedback and then sending it back. We think this just will save everybody time if you can look at it holistically and more comprehensive. So it's not, oh, this part wasn't mentioned in this summary, because then it will be mentioned in the whole report. So you'll be receiving that. Then for the following, maybe. For the following month, task force report review. So we'll be sharing a shareable PDF, so you'll all be able to see each other's comments on there. That way, if there's a typo on page 8, you don't all have to tell me there's a typo on page 8. Only one person has to say that. And then you can also see each other's comments and then add on to them. So it's, that's another place to add in. Yes, this is exactly what we're talking about, and it'll just strengthen and be able for us to be able to take in what you're saying and put it back in the report. Also, if you don't want to comment on the shared document and you want to send anything straight to any of us, please feel free to. You don't have to do it that way, whatever way works best for you to provide feedback. So we'll have a month to do that, and then the next couple weeks from there till December 7th, we'll be reviewing all of the feedback, incorporating it into the report. And then kicking it back to you all again for our next meeting after, we don't have a meeting in November. So December 7th will be virtual. Where we'll be going over the next iteration of the report, and then we can talk through any changes and incorporate things more in real time with you all. And then December 7th, that next week, we'll be incorporating that feedback, sending you another report review. A lot of editing back and forth, just we want to make sure we're capturing everything. There's a lot of ideas out there, and there's a lot of things we've talked about, so just the process to make sure we're not missing any of it. That last review, and then we will need to be submitting the final incorporation of all the edits to the governor's office for review. So that way it will be ready to come out in January. The hope is it will be out in time for Water Congress. It'll be out in time for the legislative session to start, so that it can actually be a useful tool for everybody. So that is the general timeline. I know that we started a few minutes late, so I won't take questions now, but I'm here for questions. We're all here for questions. So if any of that doesn't make sense or you want more clarification, please let me know throughout the day or beyond. So just the report success, just what it looks like. So we're, as I said, going to be covering all of those 8 topics, but we're also be covering everything else that we talked about. That is all going to be included in the report. So it's just this exploration of concepts, and some of them might be more fleshed out. It's okay if they're not all 100% fleshed out. That's more of the point of providing those additional resources. They're saying, hey, we don't have the answer to this yet, or we don't have the exact way to do it, but this is more of like a roadmap and guidelines for how to move forward. So there can be just, that broad input for some of them. Not everything has to be 100% completed. That was never the intent. It was more so that we could have this discussion and have it more holistic with everything we've been talking about. So yeah, the guidance will be very detailed, and again, that's okay. And just really highlighting that area for new research or investigation that we're like, we got to this point where we can't get any further. This would help going forward. So it'll all be helpful, and it's okay if it's not 100%. Yes.
So I noticed that the one pager that you suggested one person may read was suggested considerations. And here we have exploration and guidance and forthcoming. I don't see the word recommendations anywhere. And I'm wondering if that is purposeful because that's not what our charge was, or you don't think we'll get there. But it feels kind of weird for me to have a task force that doesn't actually say, here's what we think you should do.
Yeah, and I think the wording is not on the slides, but yes, they're the general, that last page, I'll go back, so I'll take a picture of them. But that it would be bringing everything together with that summary. Those are going to be the main, driving ideas and considerations and recommendations for we, as a task force, think that this should be moving forward.
Okay.
So there are still, again, we're not writing policy, but it will be actionable recommendations that can be taken and moved forward with. Yeah, good, thank you for calling that out. Yeah, so I guess unless anyone else has any questions now, I'll pass it off to Marjo to highlight the rest of the day and we'll move forward.
Yeah, okay. I went old school today. And I'll walk you through the instructions. So before we get into the panel, I want to kind of briefly introduce, we are kind of exploring 3 questions that CWCB just put on the table, right? There's these 4 questions really, that we're going to walk through today. One of them, or 2 of them, are around sort of the price of water and whether there are recommendations around, how to have an influence over water use and water demand through conservation pricing, tap fees. And then potentially the concept that keeps coming up that, could the state play a role in setting a maximum water use and water budgets? And there is a lot to unpack in those questions. And in, sort of thinking about this report, some of the recommendations might not be affirmative. Some of the recommendations might be, don't do that. So really what we're trying to get at today with these questions is to provide that feedback to CWCB on these questions that are affirmative, negative. If affirmative, how and who? If at the local level. What does that look like? Like, what is the change we're trying to influence? So as we're going through these questions today, we're gonna do the first one as a group, and then you're gonna go into breakouts for the rest of the afternoon to kind of work through these. And we'll all come kind of like, you'll have some time to refine, but I want you to listen to these presentations because they're gonna cover a lot of territory. Not everyone here is a utility law. Some of you are like, I don't know what a water budget is. I don't wanna do a water budget. I don't wanna know the methodologies. That is not my area of expertise. I wanna go play with plants, and get in the dirt. So it's gonna be some very technical, like utility management stuff. And there's a lot of expertise in the room, but for those of you that are not the ones implementing it, it might be, how does that influence you? And what impact does it have on you? So all of your input today is valuable, even if you're like, I don't get it. So when we do the breakouts, one of the things we're gonna do is sort of kind of talk about, I know it's hard to read, so I'm gonna yell it from over here. You know, think in terms of organizing your ideas, because we're going to ask you, what do you think on these different topics that are on your agenda, which I did not bring. My apologies, but you all saw it, and we sent out a homework sheet, so hopefully you did that. You know, what's working with current practices that, you know, might be scalable, even if it's, you know, through capacity building and individual action. But what are the kind of current practices? That's what the reports are gonna be in the panel. You know, where are like opportunities? We're just gonna kind of brainstorm and throw things at the wall about where opportunities are within these different themes. What are the challenges with actual implementation and moving these big ideas forward? And then what are the task force big ideas, the things that are sort of resonating that you do want to explore, potentially through like having a conversation around, like, those are things we might be able to coalesce around that might be the ideas that we want to recommend. The reason I'm kind of providing you this framework is I'm taking all of your dialogues every meeting and essentially breaking it down into these frameworks anyway, because that's what you're doing naturally. It's just at the end of your conversations, I'm noticing there's like, so what did we talk about? There's actually a lot in there. We unpacked a lot, and I sent them a summary from the last meeting, and it sort of follows these sorts of like concepts and themes where you're kind of talking about this just in natural dialogue. So with that, I want to get us into the panel, but be thinking about the questions that we are answering today, and I'll show up later. I got my first senior discount today. Like 50,000 older, I'm like, I can't believe you're gonna ask me this question. Anyhow, at least I wasn't buying glasses when it happened. How can conservation pricing drive landscape transformation and lead to drip replacement? What are local opportunities and constraints for establishing an efficient and the maximum water allowance for outdoor water use? And should the state have a role in supporting this? And then what are strategies for mitigating impacts of cap service fees and rate increases on housing affordability? It's really something the governor is very interested in, and also something that we know is occurring across the state as water continues to increase. And then how do you balance your need for revenue with housing affordability? Because if you create discounts for housing, the money has to come from somewhere, and there's limits to your water supply. So those are sort of the big three things, and then we'll talk about like capacity after that and constraints. But that's sort of some of the topic for presentations. So I'm going to invite Peter up first. I have not met Peter. I just know him in name only. His reputation precedes him, so we will start. With trouble. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great.
Come on in.
Is there a clicker?
Yes, there is.
Does it have a laser? Yes, that's an NGO. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Mayer. I'm principal at Water Demand Management, and I've been working in this field for 30 years, or something like that, a long time. And I'm really happy to come and talk to you guys about three of my favorite topics: tap fees, water budgets and water rates. And, oh, there it is. So I know this isn't going to be relevant for necessarily everyone in the room, but these concepts are critical. And it's really at the core of how we move forward, I think, with the urban landscapes. So, and it comes down to a lot of the decisions and thinking that goes into this relate to how we think about equity across the system, how we're going to charge customers, how we treat the existing customers. And that's sort of your job to think about this in a more complex way. So first of all, we know that water and wastewater are these fundamental services. I mean, it's basically civilization. Without it, you got nothing. So you can't just sort of do it willy-nilly. It has to be done in a coherent, rational fashion. And we want equitable rates and charges. Now, equitable can be interpreted in, equitable for who? Is it equitable or fair for the new customers? Is it fair for the old customers? Is it fair for everybody? I mean, somebody's got to pay. So that's the other challenge. Traditionally, utilities have had the philosophy that there should be no, as new customers join the system, there should be no injury to the existing people. And the reason for that is because the concept is that the existing customers built the system. They paid for it. And then when you have a new customer that gets a new tap or a new sewer connection, they're buying a portion of that infrastructure, of that reliability, that fire protection, that civilization. And that's why, that there's a charge, because if you don't charge them, then those costs get socialized to all the existing customers. Now, sometimes, like if it's affordable housing that's being built, that could be an intentional decision. Yes, we're willing to socialize those costs in that particular situation. But when it's market rate housing and things like that, then no, that is not the decision. So generally, you want to keep fees to a level that are not going to deter growth. That's sort of the philosophical position that utilities would like to adopt. It's not always the case that that's the reality of it. I mean, you look at the cost of CBT. If you were in Dacono or Firestone or Frederick, and you're requiring a new builder to bring you CBT shares, what does it cost for a share of CBT? Somebody, it's like $100,000. It's not even 1 acre foot of water per year. So, I mean, what are you going to do? There is nothing to be done about reducing that cost from an affordability standpoint.
I just need to clarify, it's 98 per acre foot.
Per acre foot.
share.
Oh, per share, okay, thank you. Per acre. Don't let me exaggerate, please correct me. And also, I got some slides that relate to your individual utilities. If I got something wrong, by all means, let me know. So, the basic concept is that in a perfect world, new connections or modified connections, we're going to use a lot more water, would pay to do that. I mean, that's just the perfect world, but we don't live in that perfect world. We understand that there are going to have to be some subsidies that occur. So then we come to the bottom that we think that we got to have water rates that reward efficiency, discourage wasteful use, and by and large we do have that, although some are better than others. And then the corollary to that is if you're going to do that, you also need to give customers information about what constitutes reasonable. You just can't say, hey, use 10,000 gallons or whatever, you need to either give them a way of understanding how much they're using, what is reasonable, some way of tracking it. So there's a lot of things that come into equity, but I think these are the core things that we're going to be grappling with today when we're thinking about all these different issues. All right, so with that in mind, let's start off with connection fees. Because this is what happens when a new customer joins a water system or a wastewater system. And it's generally utilities will have different components of this connection fee. You'll have a water resources component, an infrastructure component, maybe a wastewater if you're also a wastewater utility. You could have a meter component that's based on the building requirements. You could have 2 of these, you could have 3 of these, you could have all 4 of these. There's a wide variety that you see out there. Typically, the actual dollar amount that the builder will pay is based on a recent cost of service analysis. So how much does it cost to provide this half acre foot or whatever, however much water you decide? The key thing though, from thinking about landscape and this tap fee is an opportunity to create landscape water efficiency right at the very beginning. Because theoretically, you could tell a developer, hey, if you put in a water efficient landscape right now, we'll give you a discount on your tap fee. And what that is the biggest and best incentive that a utility has in that particular situation. And so the most the best tap fees, I would say, that are focused on this are the ones that have some ability to adjust that fee based on the future water use of the site. Okay, so what are we talking about? The legal requirements. So when you get into rates and tap fees, there are absolutely legal requirements. You just can't do it, set whatever you want. So you need to have a rational reason. This is the law in Colorado, a rational reason for collecting the rate and setting the amount of rate. So that rational reason is typically a cost of service study. That is what you hand out as our rational reason. Now, I'll get into some examples and we can discuss what is the rational reason for this particular rate. But I think if you look at it from the other side, well, let's say I don't like this rate and I wanted to take somebody to court, what would I have to prove? And this is where it's a high bar. You basically have to show that the board, whoever made this decision, did not have this rational reason, that there was some break and that there was no legitimate government purpose behind charging, $25 per 1,000 gallons or whatever it was. So that's a pretty high bar. And that's why we don't see generally, or haven't seen a lot of legal challenges to rates in Colorado. That's not to say that it couldn't happen in the future, and we want to avoid that. Because if you look at California, it's caused big problems with these because of legal challenges that they have.
Hey, Peter, legitimate government purpose could be financial, could be social, could be whatever the local government policy wants. Is that accurate?
The courts will believe you could be a legitimate government purpose probably, but yeah, I mean, that's the interpretation on it.
Right, okay.
Okay, so let's get into the concept of connection fees, which are also called tap fees. And it's called a tap fee because a water tap is what's when you connect your pipe from your property to the main, that's called a water tap. So the tap fee is, you're going to tap into the pipe, that's where it comes from. And that actually goes back to Roman times. In the Roman aqueduct, you paid based on the size of the pipe or pertinence that you put into the aqueduct. And it's so the concept of pricing for water is as ancient as it gets. And so nothing that we're doing is particularly new. And people have been charging based on both the capacity and the volume of use for thousands of years. So nowadays, we generally divide the tap fee up by customer categories. We have single family, and all these different categories. You could have a different structure for each of those types. It can be very complex, or you could have the same sort of thing. But here's the one thing that I would suggest. Forget about indoor use, because that's where you could get into maybe some different purposes. For outdoor use, there ought to be a uniform approach to landscapes. That commercial, residential, it seems like an approach is perfectly reasonable to say, hey, this is a target application rate, and it shouldn't necessarily matter. Maybe for the appearance at single family homes, you might want to have some differences. But in general, I think you want to try to have that approach be uniform. All right. So I'm going to now focus in on residential tap fees for the examples and discussions. The concepts apply to all the sectors. It gets more complicated in commercial. I don't have enough time to get into it all, but let's think about it. The concepts are still very simple. You still have indoor and outdoor use in commercial. And you still would want to use some sort of a water budget or allocation approach. Figure out what is the water budget is what is the future water use of this building or this house, and then let's set the tap fee based on what we think that future water use is going to be. If they're going to then show us, hey, that future water use is going to be less because we're doing, xeriscape or we're taking out all the turf, then give them a different price. All right, so a couple of examples. starting with Westminster, which I think everybody has heard a lot about. I'm not gonna get into the details. I think the concept is what's critical to understand. So, and I've got the thing that's underlined. It's really, so they're trying to recover the costs, the equitable cost, you know, for the system. And the tap fees are calculated for the infrastructure fee based on the fixture count. So that's like, okay, what are they building in this building? And then what size meter do they need to actually serve that demand? And that is a measurement of the peak capacity of that building. Like, you know, when everything is running, how much water do they need? And so that's one fee. And that's based on the peak. Essentially, that's a way of charging based on the peak capacity. Then Westminster says, okay, for the water resources fee, this is set up to recover the value of the water supply. And that is going to be based on the projected volume of use. And so that's where you get into a water budget. So you come up with an indoor water budget, maybe based on the number of people per house, or, you know, that it's going to be a fast food restaurant or whatever it is. And then the outdoor use is based on that landscape, some measurement of the landscape area and the water requirement per square foot of that landscape. And this is essentially the core concept of a water efficient or you know, a tap fee that is designed to promote efficiency on the start. You give them some ability to pay a lower fee for lower future water use. All right, so now Colorado Springs, this is just to give you an example of how it works. This is their 2023 fees. So and over here, this is all single family for a 3/4 inch meter, which is a typical meter. So if the landscape is less than 1,500 square feet, you can see over there, the tap fee is under $10,000, and then it goes all the way up. So then if you get between 11,000 and 15,000 square foot lot, which actually 11,000 isn't all that big, that's just a quarter of an acre, it would go up to 16, almost 17,000. And the key thing is based on lot size and expected outdoor use. So if you're a developer, though in Colorado Springs, though, you could choose to pay a lower tap fee by essentially constructing homes on smaller lots. Aurora, I hope I got this right, Tim, because this is Aurora's tap fees. So they have the number of bathrooms over there on the left. That's a key thing. And then there's an indoor connection fee based on the number of bathrooms. Then they have a transmission development fee, and then the outdoor connection fee is $1.50.08. I don't know how you get 08 cents, but you can do it. And that is per square foot. And then there's also a transmission development fee, and then you can see then there's a sewer connection fee. So I did the calculation, if the lot size is 7,000 square feet for these different bathroom sizes, and you come up with a remarkable variety of variability in costs for developing in Aurora. 26,000 all the way to $57,000 depending on the number of bathrooms for the same lot.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the new ordinance, there's now outdoor water connection fee that you have circled. So if they're grandfathered into the old landscape ordinance, they pay the full amount. If they're not, and they're doing the waterwise front yard, or they volunteer to not do turf in the front yard, they pay a lower fee.
They can pay a lower fee. Perfect. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about, and how you can implement this sort of thing in a way that provides that financial incentive. All right, so this leads into the concept of water budgets then. Because the idea of how do you set that tap fee is you would actually calculate a water budget. And the water budget is just don't think about it as a rate structure or anything like that. Just think about it as a volume of water that is needed or is reasonable for a specific property, for a specific house, specific specific commercial building, whatever it is. And it can include the indoor component and the outdoor component. Ideally, you want them discrete and different so that you understand each component. But this is the fundamental tool that everyone should use in some way for linking the water resource to the land use plan. It is the way of understanding how much water might be needed for this site And then how could we adjust that to, you know, a level that everyone can live with and what's acceptable? So it's not a complicated calculation, particularly from the focus on the landscape, but the indoor is also not a complicated calculation either, even for commercial to be done. The landscape budget is generally, it's the size of the landscape. How much water, is it gonna be full turf, ET for turf grass, 27 gallons per square foot? Or is it gonna be more like 10 gallons per square foot? And then, are you gonna adjust it all for climate? Typically, indoor water budget can be set either at, number of people, or what type of business it is, number of apartments, there's a variety of different ways. And a lot of utilities are starting to use this concept to communicate with their customers, even if it's not tied to a rate structure. I got plenty of examples where it is tied to a rate structure, and then you're communicating a particular way. But another way, just like Denver is doing, where they'll just say, hey, you use more than your budget. And they give you a smiley face or an unhappy face. There's no rate penalty or anything associated with it. It's purely informational. And that can also be used.
Can I ask a clarifying question before you get into the example? So, like, can you clarify, like, for Denver, is it linked to the mechanism in which water budget, and we use the term really broadly? There's, sort of that's a pre-development, the connection, it's done through the landscape plan, or it's done through the utility requirement for the tap. Can you talk through those different mechanisms?
Sure. Yeah, so let's think about like an imaginary utility where they have a connection fee, with a conservation rated tap fee, and they create a water budget then to do that. That water budget could theoretically then stay with that property through time. And then you could use that budget to track how are they using over or under, and if they're using more water than you had thought they were going to use, you could then either charge them more, or even as Westminster does, go after them and make them pay more money on their tap fee. That is one of the more dramatic things that occurs anywhere in Colorado, I think, related to tap fees, where you actually would have a clawback provision. But that's the concept, that this water budget then establishes the reasonable volume of use kind of for that property moving forward. It can be changed, it's not like it's, written in stone. But then the way that Denver is doing it is well, they've got all these existing customers. They then went through and did a GIS analysis, measured out landscape areas and yards and stuff, and developed an landscape water budget for all of their customers. And then they just internally, without communicating anything, they just started comparing water use, actual use versus the budget. And then they developed a program where they could communicate with the highest water users and give them some kind of information. Are you under your budget, about at your budget, or over your budget? And it's as simple as a smiley face type of a communication that people are getting. And so does that answer your question about sort of how they can persist? The thing, the concept of the budget, the key thing though is that water requirement. I mean, the size of the irrigable area of the landscape, that's a measurement. The water requirement is the decision that is locally determined based on how much water you have. If you're a very water-rich community, you can say, hey, we're going to set our water budgets at 27 gallons per 27 inches, or 16 gallons, 17 gallons per square foot, full bluegrass. If you are water constrained, then you might want to reduce that considerably as a way of conserving water. This is where I think, though, you're never going to get a state, the state of Colorado saying it's going to be 12 gallons per square foot. That would not be the right approach. It's got to be locally decided, because the water resources are so different for each community. And that's, the nature of senior water rates.
Can I just chime in? In our discussions, we've often talked about whether that irrigation water allocation is what the landscape needs versus what the utility is willing to provide. And I think that's a key decision point for a utility. Maybe you have the luxury to be able to provide what the landscape needs. I think you said this. I just wanted to highlight that.
No, that's exactly right.
Really important discussion in our organization, because it's very
It will drive you a bunch of different directions.
It's the fundamental decision, you know, because if you choose that full allocation, then you can forecast what your water demand is gonna be based on that. If you choose, you know, let's say half of ET or something, you could do that same exercise and you can see what a difference. And if you understand what it costs to get that future water supply, what your growth is gonna be, those are really fundamental decisions about the future of the organization.
So it's the community goal that it needs to.
You kind of, yeah, and it's also about what you're gonna look like. Are we gonna, you know, have stones and rocks in the front yard, or are we gonna have trees, or are we gonna have turf in the front yard? You know, what are our medians gonna look like?
Peter, I was just gonna say, you know, as I hear that, it brings up another level of confusion. Probably because, you know, when you start having a statewide discussion and you hear the term water budget, all of a sudden what we've just decided is there is no definition because it might vary depending on where you are. And so that creates this other level of confusion. You know, you can't just say everybody should establish a water budget without first clarifying, well, what is that? And so maybe the state, I don't know if this is even reasonable, but maybe the state can't create a water budget, but maybe they could create a definition of what a water budget is. And then from there, leave it up to the municipalities and the local whatever to decide how they're gonna fit into that definition, because I'm just envisioning additional layers of confusion, which isn't good.
No, I agree. I think maybe you want the global water budget. We need to specify somehow that it is adapted for local conditions.
There's that word again.
I'm just wondering how much, to what extent our water budgets either based on, we're talking about based on actual science versus observations of people's behavior.
Oh, we're gonna get into that.
If it's
I got you.
better, then they could be way off because people always overwater.
Well, actually, so let's talk about that briefly. People do not always.
Okay.
If you look at the data, 70% of people underwater, about another 15-20% are about on target, and then it's 10 to 15% who are over. And that's what the residential end use study is about. So the water budget concept is really designed to go after those 15, that small percentage of people who are high, excessive water users.
Really quickly, is that 70%, is that deliberate? Or is that based upon?
That's the data. That's like the residential end uses of water study found that of that random sample that we had, 70% of the homes were irrigating well below the full ET requirement.
So it's not necessarily a target of efficiency.
It's either by choice or by economics or, you know, all of the different factors.
What year was that study?
Well, that study was published in 2016, but then those numbers, those can have been reconfirmed.
Yeah, but Kate Larson, when you do the slow the flow audits for many of the folks in this room, that's a similar pattern. Most folks that you audit are underwatering by comparison to what their landscape should get as it's built.
And part of that's because we use a high ET number. You know, as we adjust our concept of what is reasonable, then that would change and shift a bit.
I just want to come back to that policy question for when you go through this discussion, given California is the only state I know that actually requires a water budget that's tied to their landscape code. And
They don't require, there's no requirement, I don't believe, for a water budget.
you have two options, and one of them is.
Well, you're talking about for that utility level, they're now.
Within their landscape plans, their landscape codes require a water budget, so just in terms of what you were, the MAWA, yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of going back to, because this was one of the questions that you've already sort of answered it in one way, like, nope, it's not gonna happen at the state level. Your question was, can it occur where they kind of define it? And what California did was provide a methodology.
Yes.
And then set a conservation component to what we want. It wasn't like, just do what the landscape needs. It must achieve a level of efficiency. So the efficiency goal for plant types was set at the state level with a methodology for calculating a water budget. And then people had to design within that. So it kind of goes back to like, who sets the conservation target? Is it local? And, you know, what is it that the state role would be? I just want to kind of bring it back to the question that is later.
Right.
I have a quick question on that. For California, then is it a gallon per square foot? And then they apply that on average across all of their irrigated area? Yeah. And they use hydro.
But it varies by, it's different for Southern California than Northern California.
They adapt for that.
For the inward, yeah, but it's part of their model landscape ordinance. And then they've also developed an approach where they've got water budget at the utility scale. So they actually have utility targets that they're starting to look at. All right, so this is just how you would create a water budget and the things that go into it. For a residential one, this example has 15 gallons per square foot for the outdoor. This one uses irrigated area. I'll show you in the next example. There's different ways of thinking about this. And so here's how Greeley does it. So they start with the house itself, and then they take a measurement, they calculate what the irrigable area is. So for this house, it was 6,618 square feet. They also know that the actual irrigated area of that house is only 3,641. But interestingly, they chose to use the irrigable area to calculate the outdoor water budget. So the bigger numbers, they're actually really chosen to be more generous about what you might theoretically irrigate versus what you're actually irrigating. And during a summer month, they came up with 2.56 gallons per square foot. So that changes based on the month, and that's pretty typical. You'll see, you know, the budget is shaped. And then for this particular example, this house would get a monthly water budget of 24,000 gallons, which is pretty big, for just 6,000 square feet. I would describe that as a generous water budget, probably set pretty close to full T.
Did they have a water conservation goal attached to that?
Well, so the Greeley story is complicated because this is a rate structure water budget. It is tied to a rate structure. And they were one of the utilities that skipped the intermediate step of having an inclining block rate. They just went straight from a uniform rate to a water budget, inclining block rate. And so I think they didn't want to like shock everybody. So they created a water budget that would be, I think, a little bit more generous. And that's very generally, utilities are fairly I would say conservative, they end up being more generous with the water budget unless they are, facing some sort of a constraint. All right, so when we think about like water rates, now we're starting to cross over between the water budgets and the water rate. I think we understand the concept of the budget itself. It could be tied to a rate structure or not. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about how it fits in with the rate structure. So this is kind of neat. This is from a March 2022 Independent Journal article and it looks at the evolution of water rate structures and kind of what they're designed to do. And so all the way on the left, we have the declining tiered rate. Does everybody know what that is? That's where actually the more water you use, the less you pay. And you actually see some of these things in the Midwest. And with the cost of water, goes down for some of the utilities, there actually is some kind of a weird rationale. But then you move on to that with a flat, the next up would be a flat rate. A flat rate is like you pay $50 a month. That's your flat rate. You use as much as you want, $50 a month. Believe it or not, that's better than having a declining rate. Then the next up is a uniform rate. Uniform rate is how we all pay for gas. The first gallon of gas costs the same as the last gallon of gas. But you can set that gallon of gas price such that people will use less gas. So you can definitely have a uniform rate, and it could be a conservation-oriented rate for sure. You can set your water rate at a uniform price that will discourage water use. That would be a very inequitable rate. That would hurt people on indoor use as equally with outdoor use, it would hurt low-income people. There's reason that we don't use a uniform rate structure in that way that we use gas for water. Then you have seasonal rates. That's where you have different pricing in summertime and wintertime. A lot of Colorado utilities incorporate seasonal rates into their inclining rates or even their water budget rates. Next up is the most popular form, which I think most of us are familiar with, the increasing block rate, where you know, it's like you get 5,000 gallons, you pay one rate, and for the next 10,000 gallons, you pay the second rate, anything over that, you would pay more. I'll show you an example. Every single utility in Colorado that I've encountered today has an inclining block rate. If you know of a utility that doesn't have an inclining block rate, I'd be very interested for the guidebook of knowing. Because my understanding is that we really made huge progress there. You can have an excessive use rate where you set like, okay, more than X gallons, the rate goes way up. That can also have a strong conservation effect. And then finally, what this article, and which I also agree with, considers the most advanced rate structure form is the water budget rate, where we actually have a tool for resource management. It's a tool because you can adjust that water budget. You can adjust that water budget if you have a big water year, a lot of snowpack, you can make it generous. If you have a drought, you could shrink that water budget, and then proportionally a 10% cut up to landscape water budgets would be a fair way to reduce water use across the utility, because it would be 10% big yard, 10% small yard. Anyway, so that's sort of the concept of where we are. I'm curious what will come next after even better than water budgets. So here's an example of just a typical inclining block rate, city of Longmont. I think this is many utilities in Colorado. This similar system. The prices will differ. Everybody's prices are different, but the actual blocks are not all that different. So the first block is 0 to 5,000 gallons. This is for single family also. So 5,000 gallons is a pretty good number for, you know, a month of indoor use. And you could say maybe it should be 4,000 or 6,000, whatever. It depends on the number of people. It's not bad. And then the next block is 5,000 to 15,000 gallons. So that's the outdoor block, perhaps, but there's no scaling, you know. So if you have a small yard, you might never get up into a higher block. If you have a big yard, though, you can be still very efficient and get into this block 3, and then all over 35,000 is that. So it's a simpler rate structure than a water budget because it's one size fits all, but it's maybe not as good a management tool because it's one size fits all. All right, so then who uses water budgets in Colorado? So these are the utilities that I've been able to identify that have a tiered rate structure in a water budget: Centennial, Castle Rock, Boulder, Greeley, and Thornton. And then there's other utilities that are using it for water management. Actually, I should add Aurora to this list. Denver, Westminster, Northern, I think that you could probably, the number of utilities using it for management is much longer than this. But there's definitely a process going on. So that's an example of one of the landscape transformation projects from Northern over there on the side. And they use a water budget approach to measure like how much, to understand how the level of irrigation before and after the installation of the new landscape. And it's also the same approach that Resource Central is using for determining the impacts of garden in a box. And their audits, they look at a water budget before and after. It also enables you to make adjustments for climate. All right, so how does Castle Rock do it? Castle Rock, each account has an individualized water budget, and the indoor use is set based on the average winter consumption, typically, and then the outdoor budget is based on the irrigated area and T. They have a seasonal type of structure, so it's a 3-tier structure in the winter and a 4-tier structure in the summer. And the range of pricing at the lowest price in Castle Rock is $2.95 per 1,000 gallons, and at the highest rate is $8.95. And I put these rates because I want to show you there's an unbelievable variety of and spread of pricing that you see up and down the front range, and that's where I think maybe there was not as much rationality going into perhaps some of these higher tier prices. So Centennial, their indoor budget, again, based on average winter consumption. And then they've got the oldest water budget approach, and they use the same approach for outdoors since 2003. They basically say, it's based on lot size. They consider 45% of the lot size. So lot size is some of the tax assessor made. You know, you don't even need a GIS to do this approach. 45% is considered irrigable, boom, And then they give 27 inches, which is almost full allocation for bluegrass as the water budget. So for example, a 5,000 square foot yard would get an annual allocated water budget of 83 or 84,000 gallons per year. That's again, I would say, a very generous system. But it's been effective for them, and they put it in after the drought, and they have the concept of using this to manage the next drought too. Their price range, so their tier 1 is much higher than what we saw in the previous one, 452. Then tier 4 is a little bit higher, and that's at 140% of water budget. So if you just 40% over your budget, and you would get to $13 or $14 per thousand. Okay, Boulder did their water budget in 2008 in response. It took them 6 years in response to the drought. The indoor is fixed at 7,000 gallons per month, which is probably too much. And the outdoor is based on the landscape area. And Boulder did it, so the first 5,000 square feet get, I believe it's 15 gallons per square foot, and then it goes down to 12 gallons per square foot for the next increment, and then down to 9 gallons per square foot for much bigger. The unique feature of Boulder, this is my water bill, by the way. And the thing I really like about it is this graph. So the dark is like how much I actually use, and then the light is my actual water budget. And so this year, with all of that precipitation in the beginning of the year, we didn't use any water.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, it's all right.
So I, like Mark Miller, my supervisor, lives in Boulder too, and I know he said many times that the water budget way too much water.
Oh, yeah, it's excessive.
That's one, and then one other quick question, there was some study done, right? I thought, where like when you show people you're using way less than they estimated, people start using more.
Well, you can actually, that's exactly right. You see people can program their water budget, which from, it might be okay if you're the utility. You actually plan for your revenue based on everybody using at their water budget. That might be what you want. All right, but here's the thing that really gets me about older systems. The first part of the first tier is $4.47, and then they have a multiplier. So tier 5, $30 per 1,000 gallons. Now I don't mind charging more, but I don't know that there is a rational reason for $30 per 1,000 gallons. I just worry that this is the rate structure that could be open to legal challenge, because I mean, you are just doing a comparison across everybody else. On the other hand, almost nobody ever gets into that. So you would have to, I think it's a 250% of your water budget or something. So you would need to be a gross over irrigator or waster of water to ever get into that situation. Anyway, this is the situation. Then you got Greeley. I showed you how they created their water budget in that previous slide as an example. They have a 4-tier system, and I put up all their different rates. So the tier 1 at $5. So if you see, we've seen a range of tier 1 going from $2.50 all the way up to $5. So that gives you that tier 1 is kind of that affordable level. That's the tier you want. If you're really concerned about equity and affordability for low income people, you want to keep that tier as low as possible. And then Greeley goes up. Their highest tier though is only 11, so on the lower side, and that's at 150% of the water. So there's a lot of levers you can tweak here. I mean, you could adjust the size of the budget, you could adjust the pricing, you could adjust like what percentage point you break from one to another. This type of rate structure is complex with a lot of potential for adjustment. I mean,
yeah, so the Greeleys, this tier 1 is their indoor and outdoor, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, they add up a whole bunch. So does Boulder. So the same thing with Boulder, I didn't point that out, but here, like my water budget is 7,000, indoor is 7,000, but for this month, my water budget was 16,000 gallons. And so I had tier 1 up to 10,000 and then tier 2 up to that, all within my water budget.
Do you think it's important for utilities who are considering this to do maybe tier 1 just for the indoor and then tier 2 for?
My favorite approach is, I think, simple with that. I like tier 1 indoor, tier 2 outdoor, tier 3 everything over that.
Over budget.
Yeah. And then if you want to have some excessive use charge, I actually don't think we need to go.
Yeah, just a comment on the affordability part. I think we have to be a little bit careful because sometimes utilities that have a very low tier one have a very high base charge.
Well, of course, I was gonna get to that.
Cause I'm in Parker and that's how it is. So it can look more affordable because it's $2.50 for tier one, but when your base fees are 60 or 70 bucks, they may actually.
That's a great point. And from an equitable standpoint, if you want to help low-income people and at the maximum, you want as much of your cost recovery in the actual volumetric rate as possible. The flat component is an unfair fee that impacts lower income people way disproportionately to higher income people. So like the city of Los Angeles has really one of the most progressive rate structures in America because almost all of the cost is in that variable charge. There's very, very, very low fixed component. But but from a utility perspective, or you like that regular revenue of that, fixed fee is like, you can rely on that.
Gotta pay the debt.
You gotta
pay off the debt.
This is the challenge, water efficiency, revenue recovery, never the twain shall meet. They shall meet. They do. All right, and then I touched on this earlier. This, I think, is ultimately why we all need to go to water. Because when it comes to a drought, the concept of you can only water 15 minutes for some limited period of time, or you're only allowed to water, at 3 days a week or 1 day a week, none of that is enforceable. A water budget approach, let's say you have a water budget, landscape or water budget for everybody, and you need to get a 30% reduction, so you reduce every water budget by 30%. Then you read the meters, every single customer in your service area who is complying with your restrictions and every single customer who has used more than you would ask them to. You can take whatever action you need. It's no longer selective enforcement. It's no longer neighbors ratting out neighbors for watering on the wrong day. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff. All you care about is how much volume they're actually using and whether they're helping out.
I have a question about water budgets and drought, and this is maybe different in different places, but as you're describing it and I've seen it, what it essentially does, though, part of it allows more water at lower rates for people with bigger irrigated areas, right? And so when it comes to equity, I struggle with that a little bit, but that's, you wouldn't expect to pay your landscaper less because you have a bigger yard or, some of these other things. Yeah, can you speak to that?
Yes, so the way I look at that is that if you're a water utility, if you do it through the tap fee approach, right? That customer with, let's say, 2 acres, they have paid to join your system with a 2-acre property. And that means they have purchased that portion of the water supply. And the water budget is essentially the utility saying, here's the reasonable amount of water for your 2-acre property. And we could set that at full ET across the whole property, or you could do like Boulder, where you only get 5,000 square feet in full ET, and then everything else is way down. And so for that, 1.5 acres, you only get 0 levels of water use. And the water budget is still telling that customer 2 acres, you have to use water efficiently.
But they get somebody with a smaller yard, we can get into that.
Well, somebody with a smaller yard, we might get a full ET allocation across the whole yard, because they've only got 5,000 square feet.
That's fair.
So there's approaches to dealing with that. It certainly is true that it does change the rate structure for someone with a larger lot. But my argument is that the utility has agreed to serve that customer, and like a fixed tier system like Longmont has, you could end up arbitrarily charging that person, the highest tier rate, even if they are using water efficiently on their large yard. And you could be using 0 levels and still get into tier 4, just way poorly designed rate structure. So that is the biggest critique, I would say, that is level.
Well, I think like my utilities example, we're a special district, we have no land authority, so there are relationships to serving and what happens on the land is maybe more disconnected than for say a full municipal utility. So I think that's another consideration, I suppose, in this, that we can't really tell them what to do with the land, and our ability to serve is really just about who we have the water rights, it's a little bit more nuanced on that side of it as well.
So I'm not sure that any of these water budget utilities are telling people what to do on the land. They're just saying, here's the water, and you could use as much water as you want, you're just gonna pay more for it.
Sure, but like, Aurora, for example, you guys have, development restrictions, right? You can say,
We do, I mean, you can, even if you don't have the authority or, I guess, authority to manage the development restrictions, you can certainly influence that by the tap, which is what we did at Aurora before making all of the landscape code modifications. So you can use those tap fees in a specific way to drive what's happening in the landscape, even if you don't have the authority to actually say, this is what you have to put in the landscape.
or take out with. Thank you.
Sure, I'm getting 10 years, so I wanted to connect all of this to landscape transformation. I think that's something we're all thinking about too. So, and this is exactly what Tim brought up. You can set these connection fees to encourage landscape efficiency at the time of development. I mean, that's the goal. So that you basically create landscapes that you want to see in the future, and you create them right at the beginning. And it's the same concept with indoor efficiency. You never want to go and retrofit ever again. We want to build these buildings right now, and they're going to use as little water as possible. And, we're never going to do that. We're never going to, pay to replace urinals again. So I really think that the concept of the water budget, whether it's tied to a rate or not, is critical for helping people to understand what's the reasonable amount of water for their landscape. It's also critical for a utility to understand, are my customers irrigating reasonably or unreasonably? Who are the unreasonable? So all of these, and then I also think finally that if you design your conservation-oriented rate structure to discourage that inefficient outdoor use, you're gonna encourage landscape transformation slowly. You're gonna, as we set these rates and the higher tier rates, people are gonna get the message that it's more expensive to have a law that uses that full team. Now, Frank and I were talking earlier. We actually think that we'll be able to have our cake and eat it too, because there's now varieties of grass and turf that use half the water of the grass. So Tahoma 31 is an example of the type of grass that would be almost at the zero level with the same look. So one thing I would urge you guys is not to demonize the plant. It's about how much water, what is that water requirement, for that landscape? And then you could have a lot of different looks within that water requirement, especially with the changes in plant materials that we see.
So just before I lose my thought, you mentioned the Tahoma 31, and for those of you guys that have not been to this facility before, when we get up and take a break, we have 500 square feet of Tahoma 31 right outside this door. So feel free to walk out there, and I encourage you to take your shoes off and walk on the grass, only because it feels good. Not because we want you to, but it feels good.
And how much water are you putting on it?
We don't irrigate it.
It's just natural precip.
Well, it is irrigated, but we haven't really run it. The only time
there is an irrigation system, but it's turned off.
It's turned off.
So this year, it's relied just on natural precip.
The only time it received irrigation this year was accidental. And then we made sure to turn it off. So it has not been irrigated on purpose at all very much. So it looks, you guys judge for yourself and tell me later what you think it looks like.
Did you accidentally irrigate it like 15 inches?
Back to you, Peter.
We're not talking about that volume. That matters. That was a one time. I think. Okay, so and I wanted to just mention the best practices guidebook project, which is going on at the same time. This is this project which you probably have heard of. Hopefully, you've all been at one of our stakeholder meetings. If not, there's going to be one more. But we are refreshing the guidebook which Colorado Waterwise put out in 2010. And we are we're really interested in taking the work that you guys do And your report and our report then will come out in later in the spring in 23, so we'll be able to incorporate in critical findings from your work into our best practice. And with that, I hope I didn't go over time. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your work on this. This is really important stuff.
I think it's Marielle.
Marielle.
I'm so glad that Peter went first, that really helped cut out a lot of that in my presentation where I was trying to define different terms. We do use terms a little bit differently for column utilities, so I'll try and call that out, make those comparisons and some of the things that Peter was sharing. But I'm really excited to present. This is essentially like a mini deep dive into Fort Collins utilities case studies. And what I'm going to highlight are some of our current practices for driving conservation with rates and fees. A new challenge for us among, kind of some existing ongoing challenges we've recognized, which is a pretty large fee increase for our water supply requirement fee and our excess water use surcharge fee, which is essentially the tap fee and the fee that gets charged when you go over your allotment, and I'll go into that in more detail. And then we're in the process, and we'll be over the next year, we're just starting to really think about what opportunities exist and fill in some of the gaps to help really round out the conservation incentives we can offer to drive those fees, water supply requirement fee and the excess water use fee down in response to lower water use.
Yeah, there we go.
Fort Collins Utilities is a municipal utility, and we actually are only we serve about 75% of the population within city limits. So there are 3 other water providers that are not part of the municipality that have their own rates and their own, water development fees. And so that's a whole nother ball of wax in looking at, disparities and differences and how things are done and the cost of development in different areas. But essentially we have, 33,000 residential accounts, 3,000 commercial accounts. Our commercial accounts account for about 40% of our total water use. The other 60% is residential, and then our outdoor water use is about 43%, service area wide. For some context there. I'm not going to go over all these definitions, but water supply requirement fee is relatively synonymous with tap fee, if that's the term you're more familiar with. And then we have allotments, but they only apply to certain types of development. So we establish an allotment for commercial customers and for irrigation only accounts. So that could be the outdoor area of a multifamily home. Allotments do not get established for single family residential, duplex, or indoor taps for multifamily. And the allotment is essentially the same volume that you pay for when you pay your water supply requirement fee. And we track that water use against that allotment in a calendar year. And if you go over that allotment, you pay on top of your normal rates an excess water use surcharge fee. And I'll cover some of that here in a second. But you can see already there's some gaps. There isn't an allotment for residential customers.
Do you guys choose the word allotment over budget for any particular reason?
The allotment term was established in '84, so I don't know
Okay.
why.
Yeah.
I don't know why we chose allotment over budget, but it gets confusing within our own utility and among staff as well, because we do have residential budgets that are informational only, not tied to our rates, that look at indoor and outdoor use. And that was thanks to Peter and technical assistance from CWCB. And then I think I covered, any questions about allotments, excess water use surcharge fees, how they're gonna apply, different from rates, right? I think Peter's gonna touch on a lot of this stuff. These are examples of our current rates. We do have inclining tier, seasonal use, and those are the 2 kind of main concepts that we incorporated across all of our customer classes and our rates. The one thing that might be relatively unique to Fort Collins Utilities is for the last 4 years, we've had what we call an income qualified assistance program rate. So if you are 60% of your area median income or lower, you get a 23% discount on all of your utility rates. We're we have 5 utilities within Fort Collins utilities. And it's applied to your base charge or your fixed rate as well as tier 1. So we have an opportunity or mechanism there to help with income qualified customers. And they're automatically enrolled into this if they have been determined eligible through the league. One challenge we're seeing is our projected rate forecast. You will notice, I was actually quite surprised that our rates are way less than some of the examples Peter showed, which has been a challenge for us from a conservation standpoint. Yes.
Just so I understand, on the left for the 0 to 7,000 is the 2,947, and then on the right, the summer use, so you just add those two together to get what you're charging them per thousand in the summer.
Which customer class?
Single family, so like the 0 to 7,000, you add $2.94.7. And then on the right where it says summer use gallons in first step. Oh, I'm sorry.
Look at this small multifamily across here, and then single family.
I'm good. Drew lined me out over there.
Okay. So I should say we don't necessarily have a seasonal rate in single family duplex. We don't have a seasonal rate, but we have inclining tiered rates there, and then multifamily is a seasonal and inclining tiered, and in all of our commercial rates, we have both seasonal and inclining tier. So really low rates, but those are likely projected to go up based on our a 10-year forecast that just came out. Historically, like even just in the last 5 years, 2022, we didn't have any increase, 0. The year prior to that, it was 1.5, I think, and the year prior to that, it was a 2% increase. So we've been pretty steady and very low for a number of years. This projection could really change and drive interest in programs, you know, just all types of conservation, really. So our current challenge, our biggest current challenge is that we conducted a study over the summer, and on our water supply required accessory use fee rates or fee increases, and the consultant came back and told us that we need to increase our water supply requirements and our accessory use fees, which are kind of tied, they pay for the same thing, by 260%. So those are the increased amounts here. I have so for the accessory fees, we have about 200 customers who just continue to pay this each year. They are likely not going to want to pay it when it jumps up to this amount. And we need to figure out how to support them in lowering typically this is an outdoor use issue, lowering their outdoor use with programs and other incentives so they can avoid paying an accessory use surcharge entirely is the hope, but at least get it down lower than what they've been paying historically. And then for the water supply requirement fee, that is a big jump. And so internally, we're evaluating whether or not this is the % increase that we want to, move forward with. We're taking about a year to do some customer engagement, and my group especially will be evaluating potential for greater conservation incentives and to better align, estimated water use with the cost for those water supply requirement fees. And then for those existing customers that will have to pay this accessory surcharge fee, finding opportunities to support them, so we actually get the conversion, especially landscape conversion changes that we want to see, and so people just like stop irrigating their, grass entirely. So that's our challenge. I'm going to go a little bit through our existing water supply requirement calculation methodology. So this might be a little hard to see. That's okay. These are just some examples. So for commercial and irrigation only, we have this really large table. It lists a lot of different uses. This is just a subsection. It keeps going and going. So you've got like a grocery store, for instance. The water supply requirement calculation is 25 gallons per square foot of building. A lot of them are structured that way. either certain gallons per square foot or certain gallons per building occupancy or per staff, maximum staff capacity. Yeah.
Carol, is that based on your benchmarking that you've done within your own service territory, or it is?
Okay. And then irrigation is underlined here. I'm gonna touch on that in a second. We actually have a hydrozone table, or essentially a water budget to evaluate the irrigation component for the outdoor use.
So I have a question for you on, so this is your historic use, I'm assuming, in terms of how you establish the numbers.
Yeah.
I would presume your desired future conditions are actually wanting to be under some of these numbers.
Yes, but it's more about, we don't want people to have to pay an excess water use surcharge, so we don't want to scale back what will be their allotment based on what they pay for their water supply requirements so much that they're then put in a position where they continue to have to pay excess water use surcharge fees. So we're generous on this to protect the utility and essentially protect customers too, because sometimes the developer that's developing these things and then it gets passed on to whoever ends up purchasing the building or renting the building. They end up being the tenant and who would be the account holder. So I'll get into the irrigation piece here in just a second, but for single family, it's much more straightforward and not as defined in detail. But we based off the number of bedrooms. We did a lot of regression analysis years ago to determine what factors represented water use better, and bathrooms did not. It was bedrooms, and bedrooms kind of a proxy for occupancy, which is really the driver for residential water use indoors. And then outdoors, we take outdoor, it's 10 times outdoor area, and for outdoor area, we take the lot size minus the building footprint as most kind of rudimentary. And if the development plans show pervious area, we'll also subtract that out. But we're not going to the landscape or hydrozone budget level for these types of developments. So that's an area of potential improvement. I think Peter mentioned like using landscape water budgets for all landscape types, regardless of customer class. And then for multifamily, if you have an irrigation or multifamily development, which you probably do, you're going to use a budget for that. But for indoor, it's again based on the number of bedrooms. So here's our landscape water budget. So this would apply to everything except for multifamily, or except for single family and duplex. And it's based on hydrozone in 4 different categories. And so there's an incentive, a conservation incentive built in there. You can, have a lower hydrozone design plan, landscape plan, and you're going to pay less for that portion of your water supply requirement. And the allotment piece is what comes in to protect the utility and the utility's paying customers, right? So if we establish an allotment based on the water supply requirement, we can then collect through that excess water use surcharge the funds that are needed to account for the additional water that's being used that wasn't paid for originally. Customers can also buy additional water supply requirements, but in a lot of cases, at least historically, financially, it makes more sense to businesses to continue to pay that excess water use surcharge fee than the really high expense of buying more water supply requirements. So, we also have what we call alternative compliance. This was developed about 2 or 3 years ago, and no one has taken advantage of it. Yeah. Since we're kind of the center area for Fort Collins utilities, we don't have a ton of green development area or opportunities. There's a lot of redevelopment, and there's much more development happening north and south of us. But nonetheless, we do have development that comes through, and no one is taking advantage of this. And I'm starting to understand why. I think the way we've got it set up is really cumbersome, and there's a lot of ways to do it that would be easier, and hopefully drive more conservation as a result of it. Essentially, you have to have an engineer's estimate show that your development is going to use 20% less water than what those tables I showed earlier that create the methodology or the equation essentially for calculating that water supply requirement. And there's a number of other criteria that have to be met. But this also, this alternative compliance is not an option for single family residential or multifamily, so there's another gap.
Ariel, what do you do when there's a development that is not on your list of established and known things?
Say that again?
So, in Westminster, we have a Colorado National Guard facility that is coming in. I don't have any of those other ones.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know? Like, I don't have like 15 of them, and I'm like, oh, how much water you use? That seems like
Yes.
they would follow as a default, they would
Yes,
follow the
that
alternative
is
compliance
an
process.
option, yeah. There's also, a separate section within the table that's not shown there, because I mentioned the table
Yeah.
much longer, that allows somebody who does not fit into a particular category.
We don't know what
provide
you
an
are,
engineer's estimate
provides
of
the data.
how much work
Yep.
is there, yeah.
Cool.
And if it's hard to benchmark that 20%, if it's not there, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
potential loophole that we haven't experienced yet, because no one has taken advantage of this. So for, these are some opportunities that we're thinking about, but again, we're just starting to think through some of the challenges of these, you know, really large potential fee increases. But we're identifying some of the gaps and thinking about how we can support customers who, you know, existing customers on their access rate surcharge fee, as well as with new development, where there might be gaps or opportunities for us to build out, or better match water use, more accurately with what's actually paid for. And then really addressing, housing affordability. That's not something we've done much of or well yet. And there's a whole planning team that is working on housing affordability through a strategic plan, and we'll be working more closely with them now that this fee has come, the fee increase has come to light, and the need to be, you know, look at it really critically and find ways to minimize those impacts. I think that is.
Ariel, can you talk a little bit about how you're working with the planning department to bring some of that information about kind of the water supply requirement fees into the beginning, sort of conceptual review portion of kind of new developments, and kind of what your aims are to kind of bring that full circle?
We got a Water Smart Technical Assistance Grant, which is helping us with that. So we're working with the planning department to help work with future development applicants to show them what they can do. So basically, in part, helping talk through that alternative compliance option as well as many other things. There's a spreadsheet that that either the planning staff or future applicants can utilize to see if they make changes to their square footage, if they make changes to their design, landscape design that impact the hydro zone table, or number of bedrooms, how they can see the corresponding rate increase or decrease for their water supply requirement. And so I think that's a place where, you know, we definitely have, we've made some progress, but we have a lot more opportunity to work more closely with land use staff and planning staff. And I think that's one area that we'll be really focused on, and that tool will actually be really helpful in thinking through the potential fee increases that I just shared. I'm trying to think, there's probably a few other examples. I know for working on this particular fee increase, there's been a core team that's been developed internally, and there's multiple sub-teams that are being developed currently, and there's quite a few planning staff that will be sitting on those, on the core team as well as the sub-teams to work with utility staff to figure out how to address affordable housing, how to address other economic impacts or growth impacts. So.
I don't know if this is the right question or setting to ask this question, but I'm more of a stormwater person, so I thought I'd ask while it's in my head. We're talking about water conservation as it relates to, say, potable water. How does the conversation of the right water for the right use, when is that conversation being had?
Yeah. I anticipate that that's something that will come into play. Will we dive deeper into thinking about this increase in potential impacts and how to mitigate that? Right now, our service area doesn't allow raw water. to be, you know, provided or water rights to be provided is cash in lieu only. And other districts are different and so there's kind of different types of work that's happening related to the right water for the right use. Mostly thinking about raw water versus treated water and how to maybe prioritize raw water for outside, treated water indoors. And then from the stormwater perspective, we do have some LID requirements on certain development types, but not on all development types. Single family and duplex don't require that in most cases. So I think there's an opportunity there too.
And just thinking about this task force, and again, not being from utility, I don't know if this conversation's already been had, but you know, how could we help break through the conversation of really providing that collaboration, and even a starting point of the conversation between water, wastewater recovery and stormwater? Because I'm even thinking of rainwater harvesting. I know that that's very litigious and there's a lot of regulations, but are we having this higher level thinking of really trying to get the right water, the right use? And obviously that needs to bridge multiple entities, but how could this task force help to initiate that conversation or provide a framework in which we could have that conversation?
Yeah. And not only with stormwater, but bringing in gray water into the conversation as well. We're limited in our ability to use gray water for our water rights, but we can't use it outdoors, but other communities are able to.
With those of you just sort of getting into that sort of clarifying that point, because there is this sort of like the water supply allocation or the, you know, when they're doing a landscape plan and they're talking about the different water uses, you know, there are differences in rates between non-pot and potable water in many communities. And there are places that allow a lot in Colorado, but there are a few communities I think that have, maybe it's some of you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if they are incorporating like the stormwater into a design in a parking lot, and that reduces the amount of irrigable water they need, that would then reduce the amount of water they need to count towards their water budget. So how to do that well, I don't know who's doing that well.
On your slide about HOAs and commercial space, I'm just curious if for HOA common open space, is that under the quote unquote irrigation rate? Is that different from the regular residential irrigation rate?
It is. We consider HOA common areas as almost a commercial or an irrigation only account.
Yeah.
So it would utilize this hydrozone budget table to establish what the water supply requirement would be. If it's just a single family lot,
Yeah.
we don't apply this, and I think that's a gap or an area of opportunity.
I'm just curious, for the new development in Fort Collins, is a lot of the, I know this is happening in certain jurisdictions where there's developers are favoring more irrigated common open space over individual residential irrigated space, and so that could have big impacts like that. Is that the case there?
We unfortunately haven't seen a lot of residential development in the last few years. I couldn't really speak within our service area, so I couldn't really speak to that, but I bet our next speaker could.
Austin, I'll validate that. In Westminster, virtually all of the new attached products and even some of the single family detached have no privately irrigated area, especially in the front yards. It's all part of the master HOA's irrigation account. And that's sometimes, I have a few of them where the backyards are on the HOA lines as well.
We're the complete opposite. On the single family detached, everything's still irrigated off the house meter. Yeah, there's a lot of common space, and the nice thing with the common space is the developer sees the direct correlation on the cost because of the way the fees are broken out. We're kind of similar on the single family detached where it's the lot size. But yeah, all of our detached is still irrigated front and back from the house on the half.
Drew, can you say again? You're saying there's not. Say that again.
Individual residents in their home do not control the irrigation in their front yard regularly, and some don't even in their backyard.
We have quite a bit of that as well. I think it's largely like second home communities, but so like small HOA, say 20 homes, and they'll be on full HOA. It's front and back full, and people still have a tap on the outside, but they which they can overuse aggressively, but, but theoretically, they don't have any stuff that would be interesting.
And they're often very high. I have one more question, and I'm just building on maybe it was something that Peter said to tying into this conversation. And again, I don't have this background, so it might just be educational for me. 70% of people underwater, that's what I heard. So just trying to connect the dots of if we're trying to get to less water use, what does that mean? Are we targeting, is it more, if it's less single family, are we targeting other types of users that's using more water consumption? I guess just trying to make sense of that data are we hitting the right group of users? If it's,
That number comes just from single family. That's
and that's what I was alluding to, is single family the problem, or is there?
Well, single family typically uses more than half of the total water of the utility. And a lot of times the people who are overwatering, that 10 or 15% who are using more, their overwater will be more than all the underwatering of the 70%. So like in the residential end use study, we found that overall it was slightly over irrigating. And it was because of all of this, the gross overwatering of a very small number of regions.
And I think for us in our community, that 50% of overwaters in single family residential is really associated with homes that have been built in the last 10, 15 years. So we're seeing it in very small yards that are recent construction in affluent areas. They're not getting a conservation signal from our inclining block rate. But so residential is an issue, and we also see it in commercial too, so both types of users. But the typical overwaters in our community are affluent homes that were recently constructed that are not being affected by our current rate structure.
Okay, I'm gonna move this on. Come back to more of that.
Well, I'm gonna try and build on what Mariel and Peter said, but I'm gonna try and put some economics to it. So if you guys have heard me talk in some others, I've said that, how do we change it? Developers are already doing that, already changing because the economics are so compelling right now. And so I'm gonna try and demonstrate that today. So, and then I'm gonna try and tie it into the cost of housing cycles here. But I found this interesting. This was actually in the Wall Street Journal in the last 10 days. Big article on homeowners spending tens of thousands to wild their lawn. It's a really pretty good read, and I thought it was compelling. So if you guys can get this, it's interesting. This is top of mind for everybody right now. Okay, so topics I'm going to talk about, just why is this not economically feasible today? What are we trying to avoid? I'm going to touch on why what has happened in the past cannot happen today. Just going to quickly touch on the antiquated policies versus modern policies. We've seen a lot of that already. Then I'm going to get into water as a function of the cost of the project. This is specific to landscaping, okay? So this is common areas. Austin, I think you hit on that. I'm going to try and demonstrate the cost just on common areas. This is not what happens on the lot. This is where I think we have our big food needle, and then just in the larger macro. So, what's driving this? And this is the chart that everybody probably is familiar with, or at least if you're in North Colorado, you are. This is the cost of CBT. This is our benchmark water, right? And with it, essentially, we use the value of all of our assets. You can see what it has done over the years. I recently got offered a block of shares at 68,000. So I think that's market price. And if you're tracking along the conversation earlier, that is $97,000 an acre foot average yield. If you're trending to the firm yield space, which we've started to see, that is $136,000 an acre foot firm yield. There's some philosophical discussion there. But this is the next one is more of an important trend. This is a native cooter share for water confined storage. So as we've seen CBT increase, we have seen this native cooter share increase at almost the same rate. Again, this is a direct quote, right? As developers have trended away from CBT and other assets, they've moved into things like this, and we've seen that same process following. The difference with this is you have to buy farm. You're gonna buy this share. This is just the cost of water, not farm. Here's a home supply. So this is consolidated home supply. This is a right off of Thompson River. This is a right that Johnstown uses. Again, you can see it following that same trend. So these forces are out there in the space already changing developers' perspectives on their irrigation projects. Okay, so what are we trying to avoid? It is actually very easy to go on Google Earth and find what are we trying to avoid. This is an older community with all irrigated turf. And what I can only presume at the time was a land use code that said you have to have open space behind every lot. That in theory sounds fantastic, but this is not sustainable going forward. Here is another example that I pulled from the community across the street from my office. This is a street view picture right now, one of these alleys, and this is 150 feet wide. This is all irrigated bluegrass.
Solid fence, no access.
Solid fence, no access. It is the quintessential definition of non-functional turf.
Don't go there. We're not allowed.
That picture, right? It is shockingly easy to pick on these communities, and I'm not doing it. But what's interesting is it's even easier to find out how we arrived here. So if anybody is familiar with the internet Wayback Machine, it archives the internet. So you can go back 10, 15 years and look at published water policies online. And you can find how we arrived here. It is 1 3/4 inch tap that is $10,000, nothing else. Yeah. Right, so it's really easy, and we're not picking on this, but we've evolved, right? So I'm gonna pick on this community here and talk about why this is not economic these days. Okay, so this is 105 acres in this yellow outline. When I averaged the turf area in those town space, I found about 33 acres of bluegrass.
Just again, it's just the.
Just counters, we're not on lots, just counters. There's 270 lots in here. This is an average density, which is very light density of 2.6 acres per unit. Again, this is, everybody will have a different take on how much water would be required to irrigate that. 3 acre-feet an acre-foot is what I use, just standard for bluegrass. Again, there's arguments 2.5, whatever, but for purposes of today, I just chose 3 acre-feet. In our world up there, you are largely buying an equivalent amount of CBT shares to service those areas. So that would be 142 shares of CBT, 0.7 acre foot yield. Market price today, almost $10 million just for the water to irrigate that area. That is $36,000 a house, just common area irrigation water. This is why this is already changing. So I just want to set the stage with this example because I think it's important. Yeah.
You're gonna share this?
Yeah. So, this is the fee sheet from Fort Collins Loveland Water Sanitation District that serves this today. So you can see this is a fee effective the first of this year. This was 60,000. They traditionally lag the market a bit, so we see that rise. You can see that, here's their infrastructure PIFs. I think Pete touched on this earlier. This is the cost to buy in. This is the water resource fee. And this is how much required CBT they pay to these tap sizes. So this isn't saying you go and buy 1 6-inch tap to irrigate this whole thing. You would likely end up with multiple 2-inch taps to accomplish this. But really what this shows is this is the formation of different irrigation tap sizes that truly have a reduced cost, right? So if that community was developed with, you could do it with 1 or 2 1.5-inch taps, you save a substantial amount of money on the irrigation tap. But I want to show you, these are fees that are real that developers are dealing with. And keep in mind, this is just tap fee. This is not the cost to use. This is just the cost to buy into the system. But it has real effects on the cost of housing. Okay, so This is an antiquated irrigation policy, and I blacked out the name for shaming, publicly shaming one of our municipal partners. But keep in mind, I know this is a non-pot policy, right? But non-potable irrigation is what we would still use. And the operative paragraph in this policy is the amount of raw water for a non-pot shall be a minimum of 3 acre-feet per acre of irrigated land. This is an example of a policy that is not incentivizing developers to do anything different. Right? So again, I did not want to publicly shame one of our municipal partners, but this is not a fault of theirs, but it's just a developer reacting to the policy that currently.
I mean, that effectively says you as a developer, you're paying to put in 100% Kentucky bluegrass,
Exactly. And over water.
whether or not you want it or not.
Whether or not you want it or not.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a policy. This is what I would call more modern policies. You saw this with Mariel. This is their hydrozone policy. I'm actually going to show you the cost impact. You know, how that hydrozone policy would work in a project in Fort Collins. We have, and then this is the East Larimer County or Elko Water District, which serves the northeast part of Fort Collins. Again, similar to the city of Fort Collins, similar to water budgets, just a slightly different approach. They break out the three areas: turf, mulch, native, but you can see they ratchet down the water for each one of those areas. For those of you who are astute in your mathematics, you will see that this number equates to 30% more than the allotment that is being given to you. That is a pure function of opinions back here. So again, is there an over dedication there? That could be a question, but if you can do your math, you'll see that they're over collecting water for what they're giving you back on the allotment.
Across all hydrozones or just on the turf?
Across all hydrozones. Okay, so let's take this and blow this out. This is a project we have in Fort Collins. Now, this is not served by Fort Collins Utility. This is served by Elko. But I'm going to run this through this kind of the scenarios of what the cost would be of presuming Fort Collins numbers and presuming Elko numbers. So this project is called Bloom. It's been a long time coming for us. We're currently under construction with all this infrastructure. Like I mentioned, we're at Fort Collins, and then we're in the East Larimer County Water District. Project in total is about 225 acres. There are 1,800 units in this project, and so you can see this is a very dense project with on average about 8 units per acre. Now there's multiple product types in here, and so these are just averages. Our open space count, so this project has about 80 acres of irrigated common open space. 30 of those acres are turf. That's still 15%. Feels like 36 of those acres are actually irrigated native. And 14 of those acres are shrub beds, drip irrigation type things. Again, these are just round numbers for contrast. Okay, so policy cost comparison. I put what I call the antiquated policy, which would be each one of those areas times 3 acre-feet per acre, which gives a total demand of 237 acre-feet of water, $23 million at today's CBT price, or $13,000 a unit, just common area irrigation water. We move to Elko's policy here. You can see start to see the benefits of a water budget with a reduction to 140 acre-feet of water. However, still at today's CBT cost, because Elko is a district where we would have to buy water and bring it to them to serve the project. They did not have it available. It is still almost $14 million for $7,500 a unit. Fort Collins policy. So again, I applied Mariel's hydrozones to this, and I think I got fairly close. You know, there could be some nuance. I applied the high hydrozone to the turf, the medium to the native, and then the drip to the lowest hydrozone. We came up with a demand of 115 acre-feet for the project. And then I used Fort Collins' existing capacity rate, which Mariel mentioned, 6,200, is about a total of 7.8 million just water, or about 4,300 unit. And as you can imagine, I have some comments on the proposed. If the fee increase were applied to this project, now keep in mind we're at Elko, it's not Fort Collins. But if it was applied to this project, it would be almost 12,000 a unit for just outdoor irrigation.
would it incentivize you to reduce turf?
Absolutely. I mean, it would totally incentivize it. But keep in mind, this is just the outdoor component. This has nothing to do with the house itself. I mean, this is, you layer this on to the cost of the house.
Did you run into conflicts with the pricing you're paying for water and how you would choose to design purely based on the financial side of water? And the landscaping requirements that the city of Fort Collins may be imposing on you that you have to have some amount of.
Yeah, I mean, because so most, if you look at this, most of this irrigated turf actually is in tree line. Because we have an 8-foot tree line.
And per Fort Collins landscape code, that has to be irrigated turf grass.
Does it still say irrigated turf in your streetscapes, or does it just say irrigated landscape?
For Fort Collins utilities are within the city, the streetscape is option.
Most of ours right now. So, I mean, this starts to frame how the nexus between cost, affordable housing, and why decisions, I think, are already being made. I was quick, sorry. Any other suggestions?
So did you say, like, many of the places you're developing, they require irrigated turf and streetscapes still? Okay.
Did you hear a little
There's a
sigh when you
nice-
said that? Well, I mean, it also does. It is. I mean, it also does. I mean, that is not an inclusive policy. And I understand policy is hard to change, it takes time, right, and lots of things, but, this is what's driving decisions.
So I kind of have a question on this, and this is for those of you that are experts. In thinking about how some lower capacity, because we'll get into this in sort of the challenges of how you scale up the best practices. If a small utility has very few staff and, cannot manage water budgets or cannot manage sort of the engineering requirements of establishing budgets, I often see they set those numbers because it provides a methodology that they can follow simply. It's not that they're trying to say, hey, developer, I'm gonna make you pay for turf, which then is, yeah, well, I'm paying for it, I might as well install it. So I'm kind of curious, when you get into your conversations, this is where like the landscape codes can provide guidance, because they can say you can't install turf even though they're making you pay for it. So there's capacity questions around these water budgets, but I'm sure you'll be able to have this conversation in a minute. They're not easy to manage for a lot of reasons. So I'm kind of curious, when we get into dialogue around sort of those relationships between the landscape policies, the capacity, and the utility management or individual water provider, where it's not the utility itself. Things for you to consider.
Any additional questions?
If you don't use turf grass in your tree lawns right now, do you just do trees with rock?
We haven't actually done an application where we have done any other material outside of turf. I know some cities we work in, I know Tiverton is one who's trending towards a new standard there. We haven't yet to implement anything. I wouldn't be shocked in the next year if we are beginning to. So I might save that answer for the future, because it is coming. But we have not done it yet. Yeah, Frank. Go ahead.
Well, there'd be a multiplier though for the cost per square foot to install a non-turf tree lawn, right? So you would have to offset that initial investment, but it's going to be saving the water use over time, right?
Yeah, likely. I mean, I think the compelling argument becomes there is, can you save enough, here to overcome the increased costs? And I would suspect as your rates climb, you can easily overcome those costs, but you're raising everything while you're doing that.
What's the conversation like when you bring this up to antiquated policy community. So they like, you're the big bad developer, I don't like you, and I'm never gonna change, like, what's it like?
That's our policy.
It's just like, whoa, brick wall.
And I don't know, and again, I don't wanna throw it, but
Yeah.
I think it might be a lack of time to address things like that, or just, you know, the constant feeling that, oh my gosh, developers are always pitching different,
Yeah.
why they wanna do different things, it's difficult for us to manage that, you know, I can understand that. For that community in particular is aware of that and trying to friend, differently. But that is what it is right now. You could go pull that online right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, but one question that I have is, how does this compare to your other development costs? Is this like, you know, for like the other things that you have to do, building roads and et cetera? Is this, what percentage is this of your total development cost, would you say?
So, this number here, add in the cost to acquire the water for the lot and house itself, is quickly becoming one of the single biggest line items on the house. It's approaching as much as a framing package and as much as a foundation package, which are typically two of our biggest costs from a single line item perspective on the house. So it's by itself is approaching that cost. Does that give you the perspective you were looking for?
I think so. I think I was kind of thinking maybe more at the community level. Are there other things that are the big elephants in the room for developing a community itself, or?
It all, you know, you have so many different line items that go into that. You know, you have the cost of asphalt. You have the cost of plastic for the pipes that go in the ground. So that's typically a function of crop oil, because a lot of those are PVC pipes. The cost of aggregate has skyrocketed. The ability to find locally sourced aggregate is difficult. So there are just a number of items, but it is one of the single biggest line items when you aggregate it as a whole.
Can we stay on this topic? I think this is fascinating. It's easy to think about how landscaping has some choice and some variety. Does that exist in other aspects of the development of the community? Like, if you ran out of one asphalt, could you pick a different one? Or like, is it like the stormwater design? You could do it curb and gutter, or you do more LID? Like, are there other places in the development that you have this variety?
You know, we're you know, my soapbox. You know, we're constantly concerned about cost with development, right? The price of housing is just a function of cost. And you know, we're not saying we don't want to advance, you know, goals. We believe we should advance goals, but when those to achieve those advanced goals requires like increasing our construction methods or doing something. Our question is like, can we forego something else, or is there something else that is not a value add in this construction that could maybe lessen our cost here to offset the cost of doing something different? I think that's the approach we would like to see. Often we just see continued layer upon layer upon layer, which continues to increase the cost.
Last question, anyone? I'm gonna do a little process check here. We were gonna take a break at like 11:20, it's now 11:40. Lunch is at noon. So I wanna kind of like do a little check-in here because I've got a couple of things I wanna do before we go to breakouts. We can take like a 10-minute break right now so that we can all like sit here for another 20 minutes and kind of get through the morning agenda, and then we'll just sort of pick up from there. And I'll do a little bit of a reflection, tell you how we're gonna do the facilitating questions, have a little bit of a debrief, and then we'll go to lunch, and then you'll go into breakouts. Or we can just plow through, and if you're like distracted, because you're like, oh, go to the bathroom now, I'm gonna die. So where are you guys at? Like, what's your feeling?
Want us to give you a thumbs up?
If you really desperately need a break, like a 10-minute break, and then we'll go into what we need to finish, and we'll just sort of take lunch at 12:10 instead or something, or plow through. So who wants a break? No. Who wants to plow through and then take lunch?
So we do like a 5-minute break instead of 10.
5 never happens. But if you are, what I will say, if you're in that space, go take care of yourself. I can't do that because I'm the facilitator. So, feel free, you can jump back in, so you can run to the restroom and come back, because that will take less than 5 minutes. And we support you. Do what you need to do. All right, so,
I think the questions got out of order here. They're up here.
Okay, so now that we've gone through this, I think there's a couple things we probably need to do in the afternoon. So what I'd like to do, is tell you what the 4 questions were and how I was gonna have you do it. And then I think we're gonna collectively come up with another attempt. So the 4 questions were going to be, we were gonna do like a collective round together to kind of talk about can this drive landscape transformation? And then in the afternoon, we were gonna break out, sort of address this kind of yes, no question, essentially, of, you know, is there a state role and what are the opportunities and constraints in sort of establishing water budgets? And, you know, thinking about whatever you want to call them, allowances, allotments. Talk about affordable housing, because that is something that has to be in this report. And sort of what ways that can be approached, like maybe if we took your example, it was like, if you have a water budget and you have hydro zones and you like make sure that my conservation incentive is greater than the fees you're going to continue to increase, they tell me to pay, then I'm gonna do the right thing because the economics are there. Maybe that's the key takeaway, but maybe there's something else in there you guys wanna recommend. And then lastly, just like broadly, all of the constraints we're dealing with. These were sort of like 3, like gonna be half hour each. I don't think that's gonna work. So what I think is going to happen is there is this sort of broader reflection that we're gonna do kind of together on this morning's presentation, sort of the opportunities and challenges. I think out of this, in each group, are going to come sort of these like opportunity ideas that you want to explore, but these questions you still have to answer. So I think there's a little bit of, you're gonna go into breakout, and your first question is going to be like, where do we see the big opportunities overall with this subject matter? With how we're marketing for water, the different structures we use to charge for water, and how it can incentivize conservation. Start there and see if there are things that you all see as, yeah, this is an opportunity that we as a task force think is something worth exploring. What is it that we want to explore? Sort of what is it that you're like, kind of like, that is cool, let's talk about that. Then we can get into the nuances that come from that in terms of, all right, so we all agree water budgets are the future, but what are the constraints locally and the opportunities locally? Like, are there capacity issues? Is there a role for increasing, you know, technical assistance to help utilities begin to get to a place to adopt these? What are the barriers to even getting there? How do you get from the guy who's charging 3 acre-feet flat rate in water budget? Like, that's not something that happens just like overnight. There's billing systems and all the stuff that you all understand. So help articulate what those barriers are to getting there. And you know, what resources are available to kind of get there. And then, you know, yeah, what Russ really wants a number. So help you understand, yes, there is a number, or in order to get to a number is what it would have to be, or no, there should not be a number, because we heard from this morning, there's no way to do that, it's locally derived. So help us answer that question. And then let's bring in the affordability question. Like, okay, if this is sort of where we see the opportunities, what really are the ways in which, we're going to create benefits to affordability long-term, and what are some of the strategies that you are all using? We heard Marielle say that they actually, have a low-income program. I know there's a federal initiative kind of equivalent to life fees that they're trying to fund. But how do you kind of like manage this affordability question? What are the constraints when sort of managing that? I think coming back to that revenue question. And then lastly, just sort of summarizing, does this externally have impacts outside of the utility and the local government or the water utility? And what are those? Like, who's it impacting in terms of implementation difficulties? Are the ideas that you are sort of suggesting? So that's a lot. And it's really sort of like exploring your opportunities, figuring out which ones are the ones that you kind of have general agreement around, and then really kind of working through challenges and recommendations. Does that make sense for an approach? Did you guys follow all of that? Did all of that, and I can repeat it after lunch. Okay. We have a lot of time today, this afternoon, to make it through this. I think you go to the next one, maybe it else. Format. Remember what I did? Yeah. So probably just an opportunity to reflect, start your debrief with a little bit of reflection on like those can be the challenges you see, it can be the big ideas, it can be where you think your opportunity impacts. Will help have these neat little cards to help organize where they go on flip charts. The end of the day at 2 was an opportunity to sort of just step back and spend time kind of formulating, like, we kind of think maybe this is an actual, whether we call it an exploration, an idea, or a recommendation, whatever that might be. To me, it's like, where are you collectively as a group? And that might mean we need more time to talk about this, but this is sort of what we're putting forward as our ideas that we want to share with the other group, so that we can integrate those into some draft that then brings us back to another dialogue. Because it's iterative, we never have enough time in these meetings. The idea was to get to a point at 2:25 where we could all come back together and report back. If we're at a place where you guys are really in it and you're like, yeah, we're about to actually come up with something cool, but we need another 20 minutes, I would rather hold the report back and you finish your idea, and we can bring that back at the next meeting, or do a very short report back. So that's the goal. I will work with you on that. It really depends on where you are. If you're at by 2, we're all like, yeah, we got it dialed. We need 5 minutes to summarize this, and we'll report back, and we'll go home early. That's great too. But there is this flexibility at the end of the day. Okay. Time. All right, with the 10 minutes that I have, is there another slide? I don't know if there is. What I would like to do is just do a little general reflection based on the morning's conversation in terms of where you both see opportunities and where you see challenges with moving forward the ideas that were sort of presented today. And we had a lot of really good questions that sort of began to get at that. So if you need just a minute to write them down, I'm just going to give you guys a minute. But where do you see challenges? Where do you see opportunities? And if you're already like, I've got a recommendation, I want everyone to consider, you can find that as well. I'm going to give you 1 minute. You can need a moment, and then we'll just open it up to a popcorn. Of course, I provided you sticky notes, but you don't have to use them. I just like to support the reading. Facilitators all get a kickback. It's like at this point. I feel like I'm like proctoring an exam. This is not a test. I will not tell you to put your pencils down. Right, I've done that, it's really fun. It is. One of our Jeopardy consultants was a conspiracy theorist that had it, it was brilliant. It is because we go into dialogue and you're like, I forgot what I was gonna say. All right. You can continue writing, but for those who think out loud, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to go first. Who wants to share sort of a general reflection on this? And then. Go ahead.
Mine's not a reflection, but maybe I thought about question 2.
Yes.
Potentially, can I share that?
Yeah.
Okay, I think for question 2, my thought is it's just gonna be really challenging to have water budgets as a statewide number. But I wonder if we could potentially reframe that as, is there a role for the state to help define the irrigation water requirement of a water-wise landscape? To me, that would be maybe a more valuable discussion, because water budgets have to really be implemented at the local level, because of everything, the supply, the billing, customers. But I'm wondering if there is a way to create a standard for what a water-wise landscape is potentially at the state level. Even if it's not binding on anything, having a definition might be really valuable.
Can you kind of flesh that out a little? Like, what are you thinking? Would that be like what percentage of a lot or different? Like, kind of what would you, how, in your mind, what does that start to look like?
Yeah, in my mind, an irrigation water requirement really just says, here's generally how, it could be a volume or a depth that is required to sustain a certain landscape type. And I think we have a pretty good, if we had shared language around that and a shared calculation methodology, we could say a turfgrass irrigation water requirement for a particular community is X inches or X cubic feet per square feet. And then we could say, if we define that, we could say, what would be a reasonable percentage reduction of that turfgrass requirement that would then define what a water-wise landscape is? Because maybe EPA Water Sense Code defines it as 70% of the turfgrass irrigation water requirement. We might define it as 40%. Is there a way to standardize that so we have more common language about what are we really shooting for? Are we shooting for a 70% reduction to really be water-wise? Are we shooting for 50%? Or are there ranges that could be? And then maybe that could be adjusted for each community, because it's really just a percent reduction of a turf-based landscape. And I think the value of that, it just would give us then common language, common understanding, maybe a statewide agreement of what is reasonable and still the irrigation level that would sustain a livable landscape versus, just kind of having we use water-wise for, could be anything really, is there value to having shared language around that?
I think it sets the expectation, instead of, I think in the state language for correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was when we were going through with the turf replacement funding, it was like 1 to 2 acre feet, right? It's pretty broad range. So yeah, I think narrowing down on an expectation.
Great. Then I'm gonna say, take that one into the breakouts, because I think you guys can go deep and explore that in your groups, and maybe you're in different groups, but that's one way to approach that question, and exactly I think where CWCB would love you to go. Other reflections or comments?
I'll say this now because I unfortunately can't stay with the breakouts, but one thing that kept coming up in my mind is during these great presentations is how data intensive and sensitive water budget calculations are. So I think at some point and this is something I don't know very much about, so this is as much a question as a statement, but at some point, I think there needs to be discussion about, first of all, like how often do we have to update, the aerial imagery? How often are we assuming cities and landscapes are changing and people's, empirical areas are changing and so forth? What's the standard for quality for this data? And then a huge question, who pays for that? Because it's extremely expensive. We know that, most of the Dr. Cog region is covered in very, very high resolution image, perfect for doing this kind of analysis. Outside of there, it isn't. So who pays for that? And how do you ensure if you're going to have like statewide standards for that? And some people have access to great imagery and others don't. How do you make that so it's equitable across municipalities?
I'm gonna add on to that because you said expectations, right? And I think that's, and Peter, when he was talking, I actually had a breakthrough, so thank you for your presentation. Because I'm going back to my utility with a whole different idea, but where we've struggled at Aurora is what level of data are we satisfied with? And I think we get so hung up in I need specific data for every lot on all their landscape types. At least that's where I've got kind of held up. Maybe one of the ideas that we talk about as a group is what level of data is good enough, right? Yeah. Is it this approach where we go, all right, well, if 25% of the landscape's turf, that comes out to about 12 gallons per square foot across the lot size. Is that good enough to get us where we want without having to go to the level of updated specific data, vegetation cover for every square foot, and then we're changing it every couple of years. So what that level is.
I think the capacity issue that you brought up is a real one, and it makes me think of the current framework we have around requiring things of covered entities that is at a different level of sophistication than those that are not. Sort of frames my thought on potential legislative recommendation.
Potentially rules that apply to entities that have certain levels of capacity.
In my mind, it would be, legislative recommendation could be that all covered entities are required to develop a water budget for every account.
I like that. I like that as a distinguishing line also. I think that's a good idea. Okay.
Well, and what would you think if there was some like state support for those who maybe aren't covered entities, but were interested or whatnot, that could kind of maybe help deal with some of those capacity issues, both on the development as well as the implementation and ongoing.
Yeah, kind of like the water conservation plan where a lot of entities do it anyway, they're not required to.
Yeah. There's some funding source.
They could still get the funding.
Yeah.
So incentivize compliance for others. Okay.
And when you consider capacity, do you include system ability within that, or is that separate?
With system ability, I was thinking of like staff and like the number of people that you have.
I would definitely add.
Yeah, like your billing system can't do it. Yeah, I'm not.
Or it could, but it would.
I had a question. Have we asked ourselves what has the greater chance of moving the needle? Is it new or is it existing? I don't know if we've asked ourselves what has that greater chance of moving the needle. I could argue it's going after existing because new's kind of already doing it. Well, I don't know if that's a part of it.
News is doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious for those of you who do not live where water is $100,000 per acre foot and are not on the Front Range, whether that is true for the state as a whole. Just given representation here, and I don't live in the Front Range.
I think there's still that disconnect between planning and land use code with those of us who actually supply the water or require certain things, but it is progressing.
Yeah.
And I think it's more from like an image and perception thing from that developer or whoever is building that community, right? You're gonna have fingers in it.
I'll bring some Google pictures of new development from outside of the Front Range for everyone to see, just as demonstration of it varies. The development type varies. Like not everyone is on small lots outside of the Front Range. So I think we need to make sure we're thinking, I like the question. And I think that's a really good one for those of you that are on the Front Range to talk about, are we all, we keep hearing that from Denver, Fort Collins, like, we're all doing infill. But is there anyone here from Longmont who still has 40% green space? 50% green space to still fill in as new development, and they do not have those development types. So I think we need to continue to ask that question. Other thoughts to share? These are all really good because you can take all of these back into your group to figure these out. What else did you guys write down?
I have one. For the challenges, many cities have a return flow requirement that they build in for the higher landscape water use. And so anytime you start to change the existing landscape water use, the cities are required to replace that with water elsewhere. Unless I have it wrong, I think that's the mechanism they use. So sometimes, it's alert, it's non-irrigation return flow. So, you know, the decree requires that. Laura, am I on track here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was actually asking a question, but yes, yeah.
I mean, or Lisa, so I think that, you know, in some cities, you're gonna have to just put it right back in the river anyway. So it's kind of a net. It can be a zero gain for some of these things.
Interesting. Okay. Good point. Another challenge.
I see some real benefit in tying the tap fee that is paid at the beginning to the ongoing monthly charges that the customer pays. Right, we heard that sort of Fort Collins style. We do that a little bit in Westminster. I don't know if there's a thou shalt do that kind of recommendation, but it's almost more like a best practice. Like, hey, you should really think about doing this because it connects the loop.
Yeah.
In a more simpler term, and we do a lot of it, not for single family residential, which is the thing I got from Peter. Should we just like everybody agree to not charge tap fees based on meter size anymore? Meter size?
Yeah.
Tap fees based on meter size.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yes. One of the antiquated policies.
Your tap fee.
I think you base some aspect of tap fee on the.
Right, multiple components to your tap fee.
Like because Westminster basically does the capacity aspect of the meter size, and then another aspect on the volumetric.
Sure.
Because the meter is still relevant because it is, you know, you get a bigger meter, you could use that much more instantaneous water.
You could, the challenge that I have, at least when there's no, and I don't know enough about players to understand the meter size and before the measure kind of calculation, but before Laura went to, when we were still meter size based, my issue with it is from a hydraulic standpoint, there's a big gap between a 2-inch meter and a 3-inch meter.
Huge.
So now that you can pull through,
So there's some ability to maybe bring people into a lower volumetric so that they can meet those smaller tasks.
yeah, because
And that would be there.
if you just do it by meter size, you're removing that connection between what your allotment or allocation for a year would be. It's just, they may fall into like, you know, just over a 2-inch, well, they buy a 3-inch, so now their allocation is twice what they actually need. And that kind of to the point of, if we're gonna pay for it, we're gonna use it.
So somehow creating either going to volume or creating ways in which you can bring people into compliance with a smaller meter if they're slightly over. Okay. One more, and then I want you to go to lunch.
Cool, I get the last one. This is the thought John Berger in my office had, and I just want to throw it out for everybody here, just to tie in the new with the old development. You know, when you start looking at the price of new water supplies, like, is there the possibility to link the new and the old, where you could have developers pay for water, maybe it goes into a pot and then the utility uses it to tear out, or to, what was the new word Kevin Reedy had, to retire turf. Well, he heard it somewhere else, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of maybe close that loop, like, that might be something I haven't heard anyone talk about, but as all these communities, we see a lot of interest in turf replacement, could you maybe make that connection a little more where it makes sense? And I don't think it's gonna work everywhere, but it could work in some places.
Sort of the Santa Fe, New Mexico model, where if you were a smaller development, not one of the larger developments, your water dedication actually came by retrofitting old development. For larger, developments, they had to still come up with, the water rights. And it started just with toilet retrofits in the 90s, and then it went to washers and all other sorts of indoor. I don't know if they needed to do it for outdoor because they pretty much said banned grass in 1992. So, but that's sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
What's a way to create part of it as a retrofit? It requires a program.
If it's the same cost, right, or similar for the developer, but then you get more bang for the buck, because you're not only having the water efficient new go in, you're also helping the existing stuff be water efficient.
It was a water demand offset program.
Yeah.
It was tied to their water acquisition fees. Any other big ideas to throw out?
I love that idea.
That's a cool one. I personally think you guys need like to go get one of the climate cores because you're gonna need enough people to tear out turf. So go get an AmeriCorps program for the entire front range. Any other big ideas? Okay, so what we'll do, I'll have them explain what's going on in the back because I wasn't part of that, but here's what I think when we come back. I will actually create the slide that shows you what room you're supposed to be in. I just realized I didn't put that up there. So I'll have that up there. We're gonna do one group at the back, we'll put group A in the rear of the building, and we're gonna reconfigure this area for group B. And you'll start with, again, I think I want you today to kind of like really move towards, is there something we as a group can coalesce around as ideas which you're starting to do already. So I want you to continue this. There will be flip charts that have all 4 of the questions that were up for the day. So just make sure that you do at least at some point say, yeah, we did answer that, right? Like you don't need to go through them so linearly. I think that will hamper your flow that you're already on. But they're interconnected enough that I think you can get to all 4 questions. I will be monitoring to kind of make sure we're sort of getting to where we need to be, because I'm making this up as we go today based on the fact this morning was had a lot of context. I think that we don't have to rehash in terms of what are people doing. So if you're comfortable with jumping in, that's what we'll do. And we have lunch until it's 12:07. So I'll give you the 1:10 for lunch. That's a half hour. No, wait, that's wrong. Sorry. I do this every.
It's like your California time.
So, sorry, 12:30, it's because I didn't have these on. Give the wrong line. 12:37, we'll do 12:40 for the reconvene, which is just an extra 10 minutes from now. So you still get a half hour for lunch. Excellent, really good ideas this morning, folks. So fun to see.
I'm glad I got there. 1 hour.
And Austin, if you're leaving and you're like, oh, I totally have a recommendation, you can write it down and go out and. Still.